proffer that as an answer before, but that's nice. No, he's not. Did anyone got any other ideas who Tim Berners-Lee is? Without looking on your phone, Karis. Tim Berners-Lee is commonly regarded as the inventor of what we call the World Wide Web. So, in the early 90s, at a laboratory in Switzerland called the CERN laboratory, Tim Berners-Lee took a number of protocols which existed at the time to direct traffic on the internet and combined them together in a very creative way to create basically the architecture that allowed us to build websites. Before that, before Berners-Lee created this architecture, there was no websites. There was just information which travelled on the World Wide Web, and you could have emails, you could have bulletin boards, you could have certain other traffic that was there, but nothing that was visual. You couldn't embed videos, anything like that. So Berners-Lee put together a bunch of internet protocols in a way that allowed us to actually communicate meaningful information to one another, creating what we now understand as the internet. The internet is the infrastructure, the physical architecture that has existed since the 1960s. Lee took principles of directing traffic on that service and created what we call the World Wide Web. So he's responsible for all the awful shit in the world, basically. Tim Berners-Lee, British guy, very important. Does anyone know what else they do in CERN as a matter of interest? Yeah, it's a very basic way of putting it, but I like it nevertheless. They have what they call the Large Hadron Collider, which is this mad machine that smashes atoms together, trying to create the conditions which they think are the beginning of existence at the Big Bang, but conversely might create a black hole which kills us all. Good for them. I say bring it on. Bring on the black hole. I've got fucking module reviews to do from last semester. Please, swallow me whole, black hole, because I do not want to do them, they're too boring. Now, Tim Berners-Lee, therefore, is an important commentator when it comes to the internet and what goes on and what culture there is on the internet, seeing as, in reality, this guy fucking invented it. So he should have an important thing to say. Now, 6 years ago, Tim Berners-Lee comes out and says that the web, the thing that he was instrumental in creating, is under threat from misinformation, questionable practices of political advertising, a loss of control over personalization, and most importantly for our purposes, the weaponization of the web by companies like Facebook. So we need to understand what is meant by this term, weaponization of the web. He identifies it as the greatest danger facing not the world, not the planet, but human beings in the 21st century. So by weaponization, what he's referring to is the use of data harvested and analysed by Facebook and others, and then deployed as tools for political gains, such as the Facebook data breach used by Cambridge Analytica to target and manipulate Facebook users. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, because I will explain. So the algorithms that work on Facebook's platform trawl through the interactions and activities of users on the platform to gather sensitive personal information about sexual orientation, race, gender, intelligence, and even childhood trauma, mining and refining what is called the digital oil of the digital economy. So we've got another key phrase of today. These results can then be used to target users with tailored information to play on this psychological and personal profile in order to attempt to persuade users to take particular courses of action. You might think, what a load of shit. They can't do that. So let me give you an example of what Carol Cadwalla and Emma Graham Harrison were actually talking about here. Now, cast your minds back 8 years to the Brexit referendum in the United Kingdom. In the days prior to June 23rd, when that vote took place, there was billions and billions of messages sent via Facebook to targeted individuals. The ones that worked were these. The ones that worked in greatest numbers was these. The Vote Leave campaign paid Cambridge Analytica, this company who had hacked basically lots of information they hadn't bought it off Facebook. They'd use it a very creative way to hack information about users and targeted people who liked animals. He identified lots and lots of people in the UK who were keen on animals. Now, like most countries around the world, people in the UK tend to be quite keen on animals. You know? We like dogs, right? We like cats and shit like that, you know? Cute, fluffy, you know, they're all good. I'm a big fan of both. I like cats better because they tend not to fuck with you so much. You just get on with it. But you know, but you know, dogs are cool as well. I'm down with dogs. Anyway, you get all these dog and cat lovers and whatever other animals you might like, snakes and spiders and all that good shit, right? And send them lots of messages. And one of the messages that was sent in particular was that the European Union would weaken animal protection laws. Vote leave. We're not going to do that. Vote leave, right? Now, there's two problems with this. First of all, one, there was no weakening of animal protection laws ever on the books of the European Union, and it hasn't happened in recent years either, in the 8 years that have followed. In fact, animal protection laws in the United Kingdom have been weakened in the 8 years since we left. So it's a weird contradiction in terms there. So it was a lie. But it's what they actually did to get this information which is interesting. They targeted, in particular, people who expressed love for animals, waverings on this question of whether we should be in or out, and particular kinds of traumatic experiences in the past, in order to nudge them a particular way on this vote. Now, in the end, Vote Leave won by, roughly speaking, about 1.2 million votes. It is debatable whether those actions in the couple of days beforehand had any discernible effect on the overall result. It may have added 50,000 people, it may have added 75,000 people, who knows? You can't really quantify it. I'm sceptical to the idea that it actually made Vote Leave win. But what it did illustrate was that there is a way to tap into people's psychological weaknesses about topics to make them do something. This also happened extensively in the United States with the Trump campaign in 2016, who were also clients of Cambridge Analytica, who used information in order to not necessarily get people to vote for Trump, but not to vote for Hillary Clinton, which is a different thing. So, what we have here is two things which go on. Companies collect all the information that they can, as much information as they can about you, even down to things like childhood trauma, to create a psychological profile of you, and we call that the digital oil. All the data that is available about you is pulled in because that has some value. It can be used in some way. Therefore, the oil of the digital economy is data. The oil of the pre-digital economy was quite literally oil. You know, that stuff which you can make all the stuff with. You know, you stick something in the ground, pump it out, oil. Really, really expensive stuff, really important. In the digital economy, it is data about us. Weaponization is when you take that digital oil and use it in ways to get people to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do. And we see the weaponization of the web in all sorts of nefarious ways, therefore. From me buying stupid shit on TikTok all the time, that is an instance of weaponization, to the good people of the United States of America electing a fucking lunatic in 2016 to be president. This is an instance of weaponization. And this is what Tim Berners-Lee says is the great danger that exists in contemporary society. And that great danger comes from the complete collapse of privacy. Because all of these things, sexual orientation, for example, a private characteristic. Sure, you can tell people your sexual orientation, but it is up to you to tell them that. Right? It is a private thing. You choose who to share that with. I couldn't give a fuck what you are. To be quite honest, you know, as long as you're happy, who gives a crap? But it's become something valuable and something that can be used to make you do things in this age. Intelligence is the really interesting one with me. When I was a kid, right, if you were a bit thick, you were ignored. You know, as a kid, and, you know, kids in school were a bit like, you just don't worry about me thick, like, you know, don't listen to him, he's thick. That's the big problem with contemporary society. We're now like taking unintelligent society and somewhat reason we listen to them. It's like, well, it's thick, don't listen to it. But now, we exist in a world where intelligence, no matter if it's low intelligence, has become an important characteristic of the world itself. It's become a valuable commodity. So, we have, if you like, a dual thing here. All the activities that go on platforms create digital oil, but we can then use them in particular ways. We call that weaponization. This is invariably bad. It comes from another process called polarization. When Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in the early 90s, or he created what we know as the World Wide Web in the early 90s, he did not envisage a world where a couple of companies would dominate that medium. It was a vast open network in which anyone could create anything. So back in the 90s, the World Wide Web was seen as this great source of freedom. Anyone could express anything they wanted to, as long as they had the technical skills to make a website. But now it's completely dominated by a few companies. Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc., whose aims are not to give us all great amounts of freedom. Their aims are to make as much money as they possibly can. We call this enclosure. And as Jaron Lanier argues, the digital world has become remarkably consolidated. While it was once seen as a great wilderness, the dominance of these companies has afforded them the opportunity to become vast data aggregators with the potential to disrupt and be disrupted in the context of wider society. It's like these companies, everything flows through them. Google is a really interesting example here. I remember the first time I used Google. I was doing a philosophy essay at this university on Marx. And I wanted to find out some information about something, and search engines back in the day were terrible. So somebody told me there's a really good search engine called Google. And I typed in a question to it, and hit search, and do you know what? It came up with this website that just about completely did my essay for me. And I downloaded that essay from the website, changed it. I didn't hand it in as my own, but I read it and sort of got a lot of ideas from it. I got 85% of my essay, and I was like, I am never using anything ever else again. Google is it now. I was an early adopter of Google. 2 years later, everyone in the world was using Google. It's weird to me that everything we search for goes through one thing. That gives that company a monopoly position on knowledge. The amount of data it's harvesting from people is frightening. Now, at first, Google didn't realize this. As a company, it took them a couple of years to realize, holy shit, we've got something worth a lot of money here. The first couple of years of Google's existence, it was just collecting all these web searches and thinking, well, we know who's making the searches, and we know when, and we know what for, because we know the content of the search. And that's interesting. And they didn't do anything with it. And in about 2003, they realized, damn, this stuff is worth a lot of money to advertisers. If we can tell advertisers that this person searches for this topic a lot, and you can put your product next to their search, and you just link those two things together, then those advertisers are going to pay us a lot of money to do this. We're going to make lots of money. And that's what they've done, and they've become this colossally wealthy company because of it. Basically, Google, by kind of accident, realized it was what's called a data aggregator. Now, others who came along after Google, like Facebook, realised that if you get enough people doing enough stuff all of the time, you can become a data aggregator too. And that's where the big bucks lie. So, you might think, for example, well, Instagram was bought by Facebook, so it wasn't evil to begin with. But the entire structure of Instagram as a company was always set up to be one of these data aggregators. You're going to create a profile which will link to a solid person, and you're going to put loads of information through it, and we're going to collect all that information and sell it. It's exactly the same. It's always the same model. So, we have monopolistic positions in search and data organizations, social networking, operating systems for PCs, operating systems for phones. Again, that's Google as well, although a lot of you will have an Apple phone. 85.6% of people globally actually use an Android phone. So the vast amount of people in the world use Google as an operating system. Basically what we have is networked activity dominated by a few companies who are all involved in this process of creating digital oil, i.e. data, and therefore creating the conditions by which that can be weaponized in order to make us to do certain things. I love that picture of Jaron Lanier. He's a cool guy anyway, but I don't even know what the fuck that is. He's playing some kind of instrument, but look at it. I mean, what is that? That's pretty sweet. I'd like to know what sound comes out of it. The information economy that we are currently building does not embrace capitalism as an economic system of participation, but he argues what we have created is a new form of feudalism. So a feudal society, most appropriately, describes societies which existed before the Industrial Revolution, where, I don't know, let's pick on somebody. Let's pick on somebody who we can all agree sucks. So May, do you want to stand up, please? Now, the reason why I'm picking on May is because she, for some unbeknownst reason, decided to do a different module. And that sucks. And now she's realised the error of her ways and is doing the right module, okay? So welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, May is our feudal overlord. In pre-industrial society, the feudal overlord owned everything, right? So May's got all the fields, the buildings, all that good shit, the walls, you know, all this good shit, right? And, like us, the rest of us, the peasants, alright, we rely on you. We rely on you not just for our jobs and so on, but you own like, the shops that we buy the stuff from. So she pays us and we give her the money right back, right? Feudal overlord, you fancy about that, don't you? You think that's the way to go, yeah? So if you go to an owner of like one of these companies, you're there, right? So, feudalism was a system by which the vast majority of people had no say whatsoever in the economic society in which they existed. A couple of people owned everything, and we contributed not only to their wealth in terms of what we did via labour, but also giving it back in terms of buying stuff from you. Basically, you provided the conditions by which we actually existed. So in the feudal overlord system, you might well work as a farm labourer for the overlord, right? But then you paid them rent for the house that you lived in as well. So everything you earned went back to them. It was a closed economic system. Are we all good so far? All right. Well, and I don't mean good. We don't like this, right? I mean, I'm not advocating this as a way to live. Now, according to Lanier, that kind of feudalism is exactly what happens here. We have these companies that set up and provide us services. So we use those services, right? And in doing so, we are providing all the value for them by the data that we contribute. And then, at the same time, they're using that data to target us for more goods and services on their platforms, which we're then buying. So we are also contributing in another way. Not only are we providing the value in the first place, we're then handing over money, which they're taking a cut out of. Pure feudalism. So for Lanier, we've created a new form of feudalism where users are farmed for data and their interactions with one another become a foundation of a new data economy. Oh, scary times, people. Privacy doesn't exist because if it did, this system couldn't exist. This new economic system would completely collapse if we all of a sudden could start doing things in private. Now, I would have talked about the audience economy, the audience commodity in year one with you, and Dallas Smythe's concept of the audience commodity. What does it mean in this? Companies like Facebook organize data from users for the benefit of remote clients who want to manipulate what is presented to those people over networks. The result of that is the process of capital accumulation itself is targeted in that way. Now, the role of the media in the past was not so specific. The audience commodity in the age of mass media looked at entire groups of people and roughly estimated what they were like on the basis of what kind of media you consumed. So we still created a commodity to be sold, but it was much more general. In this day and age, it's not the audience as a whole which is being purchased, it is individual attention at a granular level that is being purchased. And the way that you get somebody's attention is by knowing enough about them to actually target them with things that they will pay attention to. Rather than the old days of advertising to a mass audience where, you know, oh fuck, the advert's on, I'm going to go make a cup of tea or something. Nowadays, adverts seamlessly fit into our streams, our For You pages, etc., because they are contextually, targeted us in a way in which they will fit with our everyday lives. Which is why, if I asked you to do this as an experiment, this would be really interesting, but we have no time today. Maybe we'll do it in the seminars tomorrow. If you go through the first 20 posts that you have on Instagram when you open up the app and count how many adverts you see, you're wrong. Because you're only counting the things that say they're adverts. But there's a lot more posts that you'll see on your feed which are advertising goods and services which you don't even think are adverts because they're so normal that you think, oh, that's just a post. Oh, it's advertising some kind of service. But it's broken that attention gap that we had. Now, the big difference between old media and digital media, I hate those terms because all media is digital media now, but we can talk about it in this historical context. Attention can now be quantified. Thanks to the devices we use, attention can be quantified very directly. Facebook as a company knows how long you spend looking at particular posts on Instagram. It measures it to the millisecond. If you have facial recognition software built into phones in the next couple of years, I know we have it for a lot of phones now, but it's not becoming a ubiquitous feature of everything. But if that becomes the case, they will start to measure pupil dilation in order to understand the emotional reaction that you have to particular posts as well. You might think, no, Leighton, they're not going to do that. They're already doing it in other services, like for example, if you have a Meta Quest headset, the eye tracking technology in that is measuring your emotional responses to things that you see in virtual reality because it measures pupil dilation, which is an indicator of arousal. This is already technology which already exists and it's a great indicator of what attention you are paying. So basically at the end of the day, what I would always say is we can get rid of the word audience these days because there is no such thing as an audience anymore. We are all individuals in terms of media consumption, and that creation of us as individuals is the underpinning of this system. So these platforms allow for the storage and analysis of all interactions. Every search, like, message, click-through can be saved and added to the churn of data harvesting. Basically, you are continually adding to the pile of information that is known about you, confirming particular things, creating new interests which can be exploited over and over and over again. So, basically, Facebook as a company has perfected the exploitation of individuals online. Under the conditions of the use of the platform, most users become part of a creative, precarious underclass of labourers whose work is dictated by and used for the benefit of the platform that they use. The one thing that we never think of when we're using Instagram is that we are working. But you are. That is what you're doing. Basically, you are doing work in order for somebody to make a profit off what you're doing. You are labouring at that point in time. You're not getting paid for it. Indeed, you're going to be exploited further down the line when they try to sell you something from the work that you've just done. But that nevertheless means you still have done work of some kind for the company. What we should do is ask Instagram to pay us. You know, people often say, well, would things be better if, you know, we paid for social networking sites? And I said, well, no, the best thing would be if they paid us. You know, if I'm worth $85 a year to Facebook, well, cut me a check. You know, that's my value to you. Give me that money. But that's not how it works, of course, because they'll turn around and say, well, you're getting free access to this. I said, well, no, fucking not. I'm working for you. But that's not perhaps how we think of things. So this is good old-fashioned exploitation. It's nice to see that traditional things still exist in today's world. So, digital oil basically means the digital economy relies on your data. The entirety of the digital economy today is your data. The reason why Facebook is still important is because it is the best company in the world at refining that digital oil. It is superior to everyone else. That means that they're the best at being evil, at taking stuff for free and using it in a way that makes people do things they don't want to do. That's pretty evil, as far as I'm concerned. They're involved in what we call the creation of subjects. And the subjects in this case, this is a Foucauldian idea, that we create subjects to the sort of bureaucracies that we have in society. What we are doing is creating data subjects. A data subject is an object that a set of data refers to. Now, Facebook creates data subjects as soon as you join the site, or even don't. There's more than ample information. Indeed, Zuckerberg kind of admitted to this to the US Congress a couple of months ago, that Facebook creates data subjects of children before they have joined any of the services that they own. That they can, or they have refined their services so much that they can identify kids before they actually have an account on their sites. And continual production, did you ask how? Yeah. Because kids will use things like YouTube, etc. Facebook is integrated with all those services and is already harvesting information about those users beforehand. It links it all to static information like IP addresses and other accounts which it has access to create the data profile before you've ever had an account with them. It doesn't even require anyone to ever set up an account to do this. It's horrible. Yeah, because of so much control. Finally, somebody's fucking getting it. It is horrible. Yeah. Now we're moving, people. So the continual production process and the sale of data from data subjects involves tracking their every use of Facebook's products and every other thing we do. You might think, okay, explain, like, and they say, well, through a series of data aggregators, Facebook has a privileged agreement with Google, who you might think are their competitors, but oh no, they work together. So, everywhere I take this damn thing, Facebook is tracking it at all times. Now, it just so happens that I have Instagram installed on here as well, so I've given them permission to do that anyway. But even if I didn't have Instagram installed on here, it would still be tracking me. And it is tracking the movements of every person who uses an Android handset in the world. All fucking 4.5 billion of us at all times. This is a static piece of technology. It has static information on it which can be linked to me. I
mean, the phrase here is ignorance is bliss. We know this.
Yeah, well, yeah,
it's a form of entertainment to go on social
You know the context by which ignorance is bliss became a phrase? No? Has anyone in this room read 1984 by George Orwell? Yeah, some of you. Orwell used the phrase, Orwell liked to use binaries as ways of illustrating the absurdity of society. And in the society of 1984, he used ignorance is bliss to excuse the extreme surveillance and crushing sort of authoritarianism of the society he painted in that. Is that, like, if you don't think about it, it's fine. If you don't think about it, it's fine, yeah.
Like,
so ignorance is bliss works. The error you've made then is that you decided to do this module. Now, ignorance is bliss will work for the 35% of people who haven't attended this lecture or won't watch it online. They're going to be ignorant, but then their bliss is going to be taken down a bit when I fail their sorry asses, but what are you going to do? So, you might think, okay, we've strayed a long way from privacy here, haven't we? There is no privacy. It don't exist. Yeah.
Teacher, can I say the big book are earning our behavior class money? So behavior class, they earn money from it.
What do you mean?
Our behavior can be a class for them to earn money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not. This is. Still, people will be thinking this, right? This is just refers to what I do on my phone or my computer. No. Because.
We are feeling.
Okay. If you have a smartwatch on, can you raise your arm in the air, please, with that watch visible? Okay. What does that do? What do those devices do?
Reads my heart rate.
Reads your heart rate. What can I do with that information as somebody working for this company? What can I do with that? What can I tell?
My physical body makeup, so I know what you're trying to say about that. So.
Okay, you can't articulate it. Okay, well that's fine. Okay, let me articulate it for you. You can agree or disagree with what I say. Okay, here, this one, if I'm saying it right. Basically, let's just concentrate on the heart rate thing here. Okay. So you've got one. That's measuring at all times your biological reaction to things. Now we think of it in terms of exercise, right? Oh yeah, I've done this many steps per day, etc., etc. Well, let me tell you what else it does. It raises, that's got a number of sensors on it. Your heart rate is a composition of a few different sensors on that device. For example, it won't just measure your pulse, it'll also measure something called galvanic skin response. When your heart rate is raised, you'll see minute, undetectable to us, but detectable to technology, increases in the electroconductivity of your skin, which is caused by, basically you sweat a bit. When you sweat, you've got liquid on your skin, liquid is an electrical conductor. Okay? So, those kind of measures happen all the time. And that device is not just on when you're exercising, it's on all the time. When your emotions change, your heart rate, galvanic skin response, etc., they all change accordingly. Now, there's differences in each person, but if you wear that device for long enough, you can track how individual differences result in excitation for the individual themselves. So, if you're looking at stuff on social media, right, so you're using your smartphone, right, to use stuff, and that's linked to your smartwatch, it doesn't take a genius to put together, he's just looked at this, it's created that spike of emotion, therefore he's into that. Okay? The emotional response can be ascertained from these data points. So it's tracking when you feel happy, when you feel sad, when you feel horny, when you don't, when you feel knackered, when you don't, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are being produced by that information. Now, Apple have got the absolute brass neck to say that they don't use that information. I have never heard such bullshit in all my life. Everything that comes out of that company is such a lie, it's untrue. But, you know, if they want to fucking delete themselves, that's okay, but they don't delete anyone else. Basically, you wear a smartwatch, you are giving them more information about all this sort of stuff. So even the stuff that you might think is private is not private at all. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture then? Well, basically Morozov, Evgeny Morozov, a philosopher of technology like me, but much better known than me, argues that optimism around social media is based around techno-deterministic ideologies of cyber-utopianism. What a phrase. Again, I put this in the slides so you can just drop it into an essay or something like that. It's already pre-referenced for you. That only gives advantages to businesses through the lens of industry and benefits that industry without taking into account the realities of exploitations and the contradictions of capitalism itself. Basically what Morozov is saying is that nothing's changed. In industrial society you had the bourgeoisie who owned the means of production and the proletariat who was exploited. Today we have the people who own technologies and the people who use them. Nothing has really changed. I like Rushkoff's one better. Social media optimizes humans for machinery. What it is doing is taking everything about us which is human and making it easier for machines to read it as code in order for society to run in a particular way. Which is kind of grim. If you want the classic drill down of this, it comes from Christian Fuchs. So, Facebook is a company controlled by private shareholders who own that platform. Supposition one. Okay, that is true. There's nothing wrong with that. Facebook's users create data whenever they're online or offline that refers to their profiles and their online behavior. Not problematic. That data is sold to Facebook's advertising clients who are enabled to present targeted advertisements on users' profiles. Yep, not problematic. Without Facebook users, there would be no profit. You want to stop these companies? Delete everything right now. It'll all stop in an instant. It'll all go bankrupt straight away. But we're not going to do that, right? So, users create the monetary value and profit to Facebook, but they do not own this profit, which is controlled by the shareholders. So we do all the work and generate all the money and get none of the returns whatsoever. Facebook's users are exploited. Indeed, they're double objects of commodification. They're commodities themselves, and through that commodification of their consciousness, and then they're also forced to buy stuff all the time as well. So basically that's how it works, people. So your privacy has been completely sacrificed in order to make this model as profitable as possible. There is no reason why a company like Facebook couldn't decide, do you know, we're not going to share information on sexuality. You've got some kind of psychological disorder, we're not going to share information on that. That's privileged information which we're not going to do anything about. We're not going to share information on where you are at all times, because that means necessarily this technology is unsafe. It can be hacked, people could track people on it. We're not going to do that. It could do any of those things that it chose to do, but it chooses not to do them because that would limit the amount of money that could be made. So it decides instead to do everything because that's the way you make the most money. This is a purely economic decision. Privacy itself isn't something that can be commodified. You make things private, less money. Does a company like this want less money? No. Why? Because Mark Zuckerberg needs a new fucking hoodie. I don't know. You know, it's not as if, you seen his haircut? It's not as if he's spending a lot of money on anything. Haircut is worse than mine. So, in terms of privacy, there's a root cause of it is the existence of these companies and these things. The right to privacy is neither a right to secrecy nor a right to control, but a right to appropriate the flow of personal information. So Nissenbaum describes privacy as a right to limit or control the flow of what is known about us. In effect, our use of social media platforms mean we give away that right. So privacy itself is destroyed. Surveillance is just ubiquitous. I get really depressed doing this lecture. So, Hannah Arendt wrote about privacy. I've written about Hannah Arendt, so I know a little bit about this. What Arendt argued is that distinction within the private and public realms equals the distinction between things that should be shown and things that should not be hidden. What Arendt argues in her work is that private and public should always be separate from one another, but there are certain contradictions in capitalism which means that they at times get mixed, and this is a big problem for human beings, because she identifies that if we don't have private spaces, we become a different form of human being altogether. We become always public, and that's not healthy for us. My argument is that's happened. Public and private sphere no longer exist. There is just the data sphere. Everything's being watched all the time. Everything's being collected. Everything is being pulled in. We have no private space. I'm going to leave some of these slides for you to go through yourselves, because I think that one says it all. Facebook is a huge advertising, capital accumulation, and user exploitation machine. Data surveillance is the means for Facebook's economic ends. The only privacy that exists on Facebook is for the company itself, who we have no say in how it operates. We have no access to decisions that are made. We have no access to how information is used. We have no access to their algorithms. We have no access to their profits. They've got plenty of privacy. We have none. Rock up to Facebook's offices in Northern California and ask for some money and see what happens. I don't think it would be pretty. If we limited access to digital oil, we limit the companies themselves. But as a society, we're not prepared to do that. We're not prepared to undershare. We're always primed to overshare at all times. Do I need to talk about Foucault here? Yeah. Foucault argued that power is not located in powerful bodies such as the state or companies. Power produces reality itself. It produces the domains and objects and rituals of truth. The individual and the knowledge that may be gained of him belong to this production. So the corporate platforms owned by Facebook not only strongly mediate the cultural expressions of internet users, but are involved in the creation of our reality itself, which means that they are the ultimate arbiters of power in everyday society today, and that means that the power to have a private life or not exists with these companies. But I've already talked about the news in lecture 2. The way that they do this is by shifting discipline to control. So I'm going to skip over that. Basically, the production of individuals to companies like Facebook is what we call the quantified self. We have created, and this is why people have got these smartwatches, right? Fuck do you care how many steps you've done? Why do you care? Why do you care? What does this say? What does this? Does it say something about you as a person that you've done 10,000 steps?
Achievement.
Oh, it's an achievement. You're a biped, dude. You're supposed to fucking walk. Do you know that's what millennia of evolution have created us this way? Yeah, I don't think it's much of an achievement to walk. You know, yeah, it links again to that thing I was talking about in lecture 2, right? The achievement society. It's another form of achievement, right? And we have created, you know, again, I'll take it into a different direction here, but why do you care how many likes you get? Do you think it has anything to do with reality whatsoever, or your personal worth as an individual? No, it doesn't. But we've created a quantified society and a quantified self on the basis of these companies that quantify us all the time. This is where the whole thing becomes reflected back in ourselves. If you want to understand how all this surveillance and quantification creates people. Just look at how much we quantify ourselves. Their business model is quantify you as much as possible. What do we do now? We quantify ourselves. How many steps have I done today? How many calories have I consumed? How many units of alcohol am I drinking per week? That's a frightening one, man. Isn't the advised one like 21? That's like at lunchtime. What the fuck are they on about? 21 units. Lightweight. And we've got these qualifications everywhere. How much time have you spent on this module on Canvas? And can you access that and see how much time you spent on things? I don't care. Did you learn something? That's much more important than whether you spent a lot of time doing something. But we now have become a quantified society on the back of the eradication of this. The eradication of the gap between the private and the public. Which is kind of really, really frightening. I'm going to skip over these because they're not necessarily important. I want to get to the end. There's more information in the slides, and feel free to look through the slides in the context of the assignments that you're doing if you feel there's information which you can use there. I'm kind of just repeating myself with those final slides, giving you more context, more references basically. Facebook are evil. Okay? But they're evil in the same way that every other digital company is. They're all evil. The commodity is you. There is no such thing as privacy. Excuse me.
To get to